All right, and before we begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Huchum, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all of the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our webinar, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shell Mound, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it is not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. The city of Berkeley will continue to build relationships with the Lejeune tribe and to create meaningful actions that uphold the intention of this land acknowledgement. Okay, so I'll quickly take us through the agenda for tonight's webinar. First, I will give an overview of civic arts in case you are new to our program. We'll talk about some important dates for the grant cycle, program details such as eligibility and program requirements. We'll go through the application process, including what's going to be included in your application and a quick tutorial of Submittable, which is our grants management system. Then we'll go through what the review process is like, including the review criteria and the scoring scale that the review panelists will use to evaluate your application. Then we'll go over some grant writing tips and talk about ways you can access technical assistance for your application. And then at the end, I will answer any questions you may have, and you can use the question icon that should be at the bottom of your Zoom window to put any questions. And I see that some folks have already started utilizing that. So those questions will be addressed at the end of this presentation. And I do ask that you keep your questions pretty general. If you have specific questions about the particular project you'd like to propose in your application, you can contact me directly with that question or those questions, and I can provide you some more direct feedback or answers to those questions. All right, so our mission at Civic Arts is to support a culturally vibrant and diverse arts ecosystem within the city of Berkeley, and we do that in several ways. Funding artists, nonprofit organizations, and festivals through our grants program is one of the ways that we fulfill that mission. And we also have a robust public art program. We provide access to arts and cultural experiences for residents and visitors to Berkeley. And we also have a new program. We've added Berkeley's Poet Laureate program to our offerings, and it just had its inaugural run this year. I wanted to talk about cultural equity as it pertains to the grants program. On the right side of this slide, you'll see our cultural equity statement for all of Civic Arts. But I wanted to highlight some concrete ways our grants program is committed to making the program more equitable. So in all of our programs, we've increased the equity review criterion and the percentage, and that actually started last year. So this, after last year's grant cycle ends, hopefully we'll start to see if that's making an impact and how we can further refine in the future grant cycles. We've started offering translation services for our application, and if you submit an application in a different language than English, our guidelines have been reviewed by the city's disability services program. We've recruited a larger review panelist pool, and there is a prioritization of Black, Indigenous, and people of color as grant review panelists in all of our grant programs. We've also done some targeted outreach to make sure folks that haven't been engaging with our grants program or didn't maybe not know about it, trying to get the word out that way. And then we also have a new grant category that's we are hoping that it will also pertain to our commitment to cultural equity by this arts program grant, which is new. There will be 2 webinars on that, but hopefully we can engage with new audiences, new communities through that grant program. All right, so some important dates to keep in mind. The grant applications are now open, and the deadline to apply is February 28th at 11:59 p.m. Even though there's 11:59 p.m., please remember that staff probably will not be available. Well, not probably, they will not be available after 4:30 p.m. On the day of the deadline. So please keep that in mind when you're thinking about when you might submit. Grant review panelists will score the applications. They'll have March and April to do that. And then applicants will be notified about the day or days of the public grant review panel meeting, so you can attend if you like. And then June 5th, the grant subcommittee of the Civic Arts Commission will discuss funding scenarios based on scores. We'll know what our actual grant budget to award will be on June 25th and June 26th. The Civic Arts Commission will approve all grant awards, and then all applicants will be notified in July, early July. So this grant is a $4,000 award to create original work. It's not necessarily for exhibiting maybe old works that you've already created or staging a popular play. It is for creating new work. And I've included on this slide some of the things that you can use the funds for, but I would really recommend reviewing the guidelines so you understand what the use restrictions are. It is a pretty flexible grant, but you'll want to make note of what you cannot use the grant funds for. All right, the first point of eligibility for this grant is that you must be a current Berkeley resident, and you'll need to provide proof of this in your application. Next, you'll need to apply as an individual. So this is not a grant where teams or organizations can apply. You can't be a grantee from the past 2 grant cycles. So if you were an individual artist projects grantee from last year or the year before, you will not be eligible to apply. Now, if you have applied but haven't been awarded, you can apply again. You can be an artist in any artistic discipline. You cannot be a full-time student or city employee during any portion of the grant activity period. And you must be in good standing with Civic Arts, and that mostly pertains to if you've been a grant recipient in the past, that you have completed all outstanding reports. All right, so our program requirements, again, this is for new original work, and the project must include a public presentation of the work that you create with the funds. And this presentation must incorporate meaningful community engagement. Both the work on the project and the public presentation also must be in Berkeley. And you'll need to complete the project presentation. Both the project and the presentation need to be completed between July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025. That's the grant activity period. And if awarded, you'll need to complete a final report that describes how the project went. And that is due July 30th, 2025. That's 30 days after the end of the grant activity period. And please note that all grantees will be required to participate in an artist showcase to talk about their project, but the details on that are not determined yet. All right, so all application materials need to be submitted electronically using our submittable grants management system by February 28th at 11:59 p.m. No extensions will be granted. So I really recommend applying early in case you run into any technical issues. But technical assistance will be available throughout the application period. And the application includes some questions that require you to enter text and some that require file uploads. So you'll need to upload your proof of residency, your resume, and all of your work samples. And for the narrative questions, you'll need to enter text in all the text fields. All right, so now we'll go through a quick submittable tutorial. And just looking at this image on the left, if you haven't signed up for a free submittable account, you will sign up using this tab right here on our landing page. But if you already have an account, you can sign in. So I've already signed in and I will do a new share. So if you go to our landing page for our grant opportunities, it will look like this. And you will want to locate the individual artist grant or individual artist projects grant. This link will take you directly to the guidelines for this grant application, and please review them before applying. But once you've reviewed those guidelines, you can hit submit. And it will take you to the application. It won't take you directly to the application if you've logged in before. It will take you through an eligibility check, which will be some additional questions to determine whether or not you're eligible for this grant category. And if you answer the questions and you are eligible, it will take you to this. So there's one quick step that I've skipped here. That'll be the eligibility questions. But then the application will take you here. And this top section is not scored by panelists. It's for further eligibility checking by staff. The panelists will not see your contact information. But this is what the beginning of the application looks like. Then you will see each section of the application that is scored. You'll first see the review criteria and the percentage of your total score that it's worth, and some details about what the review criteria entail. Beneath the review criteria are all the application questions that pertain to that particular review criteria. You'll also see in places where you will enter text, the word count limit. So you can use that as a guide. And then some of the questions do have additional instructions below them. So please pay attention to those because there may be some information you don't want to miss in how you answer your question. I do want to mention that almost all of the fields on this particular grant application are required. I think the website is the only one that is not required. So it won't let you submit the application with a partially completed application. If you are not finished with the application at the bottom, you can press save draft and come back to it. This application will auto save, but to prevent losing any of your work, you'll want to make sure you're frequently saving draft. And then when you're ready and finished with everything, you can submit your application. If you save draft and you're returning to your dashboard of submittable, it may look like this. And as you can see, I haven't submitted any applications, so this is blank, but I did start one. So you can access your drafts here in this draft tab, and then it will take you to the application in progress. And then you can click continue, and that will take you to your draft where you can finish it. This will remind you of when the deadline is. You will need to submit the application before the deadline. Okay. I'll do a new share, get back to our slideshow. One more thing I want to mention before we move on is that if you do run into technical difficulties using Submittable, you will need to contact their customer support, and it is in all of our guidelines. The link is here. That is because I don't have access to your account, so they're the only ones that can help you with anything that's more technical on the application side. So once you've submitted your application and the deadline passes, staff will review all the applications for eligibility and then assign those eligible applications to the grant review panelists. And the panelists will have several weeks to review the application using the review criteria and the scoring scale. And then we will meet virtually over Zoom to discuss each application. All applicants will be notified about the status of their application. So if for any reason it's ineligible, you will be notified about that. And then you will also be notified about the date and time of the public grant review panel. And then once the review panel concludes, staff will review the scores and come up with funding scenarios. And for this grant category, we generally only have funding for 10 grants. So just keeping that in mind, this has become a very competitive grant category. But then the funding scenarios, once all the scores are finalized, will be discussed with the grant subcommittee, and they will take the final recommendations for funding to the Civic Arts Commission for approval. And all Civic Arts Commission meetings are open to the public, and applicants will be notified about the time and date of the meeting where those awards will be approved, so you can attend if you'd like. And then soon after the commission approves the grant award, Civic Arts staff will notify all of the applicants with acceptance or decline letters. Okay, so to get into the review criteria, these are the 4 review criteria that panelists will use to evaluate your application. These are included in the grant guidelines, and I do highly recommend reviewing them thoroughly. Each of the review criteria are weighted, so you'll see that the scores panelists give in these areas will be worth more or less on your total score based on their percentage. So you'll see 3 of them are worth 30% of the total score, and 1 is worth 10. And the review criteria are artistic practice and experience, worth 30%. The project narrative, also 30%. Cultural equity, 30%. And then community impact is 10% of your score. And before I move on, I will note again that all of these review criteria are in the guidelines, and they're also listed in your application and above the questions that pertain to those particular review criteria. Okay, and this is the scoring scale that panelists will use in conjunction with the review criteria. So panelists will assign a numerical value to each review criteria using this rubric. With the weighted review criteria, the final scores will be averaged between all the panelists who reviewed the application. So for each of these review criteria, they will each get a 0 through 5 score. And then that's where the weighted values come into play. So if you, for example, if you did really high in community impact and got 5, but you got 1s in all other areas, that's still going to result in a lower score overall because community impact is only worth 10%. And these are those descriptions again. So now we'll move on to some grant writing tips. Specificity is key when writing your applications or writing your application answers. Details, moving on into the next bullet. Do not assume panelists know your work, know your artistic discipline, or any of the venues you may use. And this also ties into that specificity. Panelists will be from all over the Bay Area and come from different backgrounds. So keep that in mind. You'll want to be specific in all aspects in how you're answering your questions. I also highly recommend starting your application early. You can start it today. The applications are open. If you haven't started it, you could take a look and see how you might start answering those application questions, but do start early. I recommend having someone else review your application answers. It's always good to have another set of eyes on your work to be a proofreader and to make sure there's clarity in how you're answering the questions and to look for any typos. Typos are not scored, but a clear application questions are always beneficial for panelists. There are some description fields connected to the work sample file uploads. So you'll want to use these not only to describe the work you've uploaded, but also to let panelists know if they should be looking at any particular part of your work sample, if you want them to pay attention to a specific part. So if you are a writer and uploading a long written document, you can say, please look at page 10. This is where I want you to focus. Or if you've got an audio file, you could say something like, please listen to minutes 6 through 7. And this is because panelists will spend up to 10 minutes reviewing all of the work samples. That's the instructions they will be given. So please keep that in mind when you are choosing your work samples. You don't want to give a 4-hour documentary if they're only going to be able to devote 10 minutes to looking at your work. And in conjunction with starting your application early, do not wait until the last minute to submit your application. We cannot accommodate for any hardware, software, or internet issues you may be having on the day of the deadline, and no extensions will be given. There is I think there's a 7.5-week application period, so please utilize that time and start and complete your application early. There are several ways you can access help with your application, and first and foremost, please read the guidelines and you'll likely find answers to your questions in there. But you can also check out our frequently asked questions document on our website. You can also email or call me, or you can schedule a 15-minute appointment for an audio or a video call with me. And you can do this using the link on our website to my Calendly scheduler. There's links to schedule that in all of the grant guideline documents as well. On the left is an image of what that looks like. You can select a day that is highlighted, and then from there, select a time that works for you. As far as reviewing or answering questions that you may have, we can't read your applications, or I cannot read your application for you before the application deadline, but you can ask me any questions you have, and I can answer them again on the phone, email, virtual appointment, but I can't review your whole application and then give you feedback. And unfortunately, we do not have sample applications available. And again, if you need technical assistance specifically with your submittable account and accessing your submittable account, or you can't find something in there, you will need to contact Submittable's customer support for that. All right, so this concludes the presentation portion of the webinar. My contact information is on the left. And again, all of our technical assistance resources are on our website. And that's also where you'll find the link to the application and where you can apply. So I will stop the recording.